and Jesus makes him the hero of the story. Now, the Samaritans and the Jews had a fight that went back 700 or 800 years at this point. When the Jews were living in Israel, the Assyrians come in and conquer them and take some of them off to exile. While Samaritans were considered the descendants of mixed marriages between Jews and Assyrians. So they married the conquerors and produced this new race, for want of a better word, this new ethnic group. They are primarily Jewish. And so you can imagine the tension in the community by these people who married the conquerors. And then a bunch of the Jews get sent off to exile in Babylon, and when they come back, they want to start things up just the way they were. They want to rebuild the temple and fix it back to the way it was. And guess who doesn't want to go along with the program? The Samaritans. The Samaritans have been living there all the time. They don't want the temple again. They oppose it. They have, while everybody was gone, everybody else was gone, they have set up their own worship in another place. And they're pretty much carrying on what looks to them like Jewish worship. So they kind of feel like they're in charge. And so when the other Jews come back, there's a lot of fighting about this. Who's really in charge? Who's really the authority? Well, of course, the Samaritans are a minority, and it's really easy to push them down. So you have this group of people who are socially outcast because of mixed marriages. And again, in this country, growing up, when I was growing up, being the product of a mixed marriage was not a very cool thing. Thankfully, things are beginning to change, and have pretty much changed in places where we live, but not all over. And then they were religiously outcast because they were doing what the majority thought was heretical. They're using our religion incorrectly. So you could just imagine how bad it was. And so Jesus goes. And this is the guy who really follows the law, who really understands the truth of our teaching. So, another title for this story might be, Don't Judge a Book by Its Cover. Because one of the tricks in the story is to tell this lawyer the person that you think isn't righteous or can't be righteous really is. And it's a way of confronting the lawyer's prejudice. There's so many things that keep us from being compassionate in this world. Everything from our responsibilities to not having the time, to not having the money, to not being able to figure out the right thing to do, that we just give up and don't do anything. I think this story is not about telling us to do more than we're doing, or to do all, take care of everybody. I think the point of the story is to do something, to not be paralyzed in our indecision and our rationalization, but to do something. And of course, one of the messages that is addressed here is that of accepting people of other races and ethnicities, especially those people we have prejudices against. And as I was thinking about this, the music video came to mind, and I thought, well, this would be a great way of talking about this vision of one world that overcomes racial boundaries. But then you have the problem of it being by Michael Jackson. Now, there's no question that Michael Jackson was a brilliant, gifted genius, right? And I believe he really did change the world in terms of, through his music, brought across this message of eliminating boundaries between race. And actually the video, most of the video is this wonderful celebration of people all over the world. It really celebrates. It's not just don't hate them. It really celebrates everyone around the world. But then you've got the problem of Michael Jackson. This was a weird guy. There's no other way to describe it. And that part of it, he was weird partly to get publicity. I mean, that's how you get famous. So I'm sure he did some of the things he did to get richer. And he was incredibly self-indulgent, you know. Anything he wanted, he bought for himself, and he had the money to do it. But he was also filled with self-hatred. I mean, what else could all that plastic surgery be about, is hating how he looked or something about himself that he was trying to change. He was full of anguish when he talks about his childhood, what a miserable childhood he had. He's a really tortured character in many ways. And then, you know, the had problems with drugs. We don't know what killed him, but certainly he was in rehab at least once, quite publicly. So he was a mixed bag, to put it at best. And then he had this terrible thing of accusations, many accusations of being a child molester hung over him. Again, he was never convicted, but there was an awful lot of it. And granted, he could have been exploited. Perhaps we'll never know the truth about that. So here he is, this tortured person who perhaps who makes very bad choices in his life, but who also has this genius about which he is able to rise above many of the things that created difficulties in his life to produce this wonderful vision of what the world can be. And so the video starts with some intergenerational conflict. Actually, there's several versions of this video, but one in which he does some vandalism, and then this version in which there's intergenerational conflict. And I think the anger that precedes this video has a lot to do with frustration about what is it going to take for people to get the message. We see in the video a person of an older generation, complacent, not interested in anything but watching TV and just cruising along. And this video, in many ways, I think, was an attempt to wake people up. In the same way Jesus was trying to wake people up to seeing our neighbor in a different way. So let's watch the video. But what I did want to end with is the line that was read from the little story this morning. There is a place in everyone that can carry the light. And that's really what I want us to remember from this parable. We can't do it all. But there is a place in everyone that can carry the light. If we have ears to hear, eyes to see.